What happens if every player in a team loves important matches in Football Manager? Well, today we're going to find out. In this hidden attribute experiment, we are going to pick 3 teams and set every player to raise their game perfectly for the big matches. The attribute will go up to 20 across the board, and we're going to see the effect it has on all 3 teams over the course of a season. Then next week, we're going to do the exact opposite. We'll set all of the important matches to 1 for the same players and the same teams. And we'll see what the reverse effect has, and if we can learn anything from it. We're desperate to find out which mental attribute has the biggest impact in Football Manager, the one that for so many years led the likes of Everton and Spurs to relegation despite being in the top 6 and 7 in real life, and the type of one that just makes you scream your head off in a save because you have absolutely no idea why a certain thing is happening. Well, if you want to find the answer with me as we continue our hidden attributes experiments, then please do put a thumbs up on the video and subscribe down below for daily FM content. This is our second one of these following the consistency experiment over the last 2 Sundays. That's in the eye above, as well as our top 3 playlists and our 2 long-term stories. They have thrilling ends to the season to come in the next couple of days, so please do stick around and check those out too. And there will be a new top 3 later on today as well. But thank you as always for your incredible support. You can find all the other links down in the description below. But today is all about raising your game for the big occasion. It's something that so many of us focus on intensely when looking at scout reports, discounting people that dread the big games, always looking for players that are comfortable in them. But does it actually make a difference? That's what I want to know, because I kind of feel over scout reports in the years, I've maybe judged players a bit harshly, and perhaps something I feel would be a big negative in real life, a massive downside to a personality. Maybe it just doesn't have the same impact in FM. So just like we did in our consistency experiment, we have taken Arsenal, West Ham and Blackburn Rovers, and we have set all of their players to have the perfect 20 out of 20 attribute for playing and raising their game in the big matches. Hopefully, as they love the important games, they will get the big results against the big sides, or will we at least see a noticeable difference? And based on what we saw with the consistency experiment, what on earth is it going to do to player average ratings? All of that is about to be found out as we switch over to FM. But what about you down in the comments? Do you think it will have more or less of an impact than the consistency experiment? And do you currently discount players just on the fact that they are dreading big games? And maybe decide not to sign them even if they're great, thinking they might not suit you? I'm interested to know that as well. But for us, we probably think Blackburn are going to be the biggest beneficiaries of this. Their average as a team, probably most players were in the 10 or 11 for important matches attribute. And in a consistency experiments and in real life, we saw they always dropped off towards the end of the year. So it'd be really intriguing to see if the same happens here. For West Ham and for Arsenal in the Premier League, it's not quite so much of an impact, but it will be interesting to see what happens in cup competitions and also what happens in those run-ins if they're fighting for important spots in Europe. So hopefully you're looking forward to finding out with me. There's not long to wait now. Let's head into Football Manager after a holidayed first season and find out what influence the important matches hidden attribute has. And here we are on the 1st of June 2022. We're back with the same 3 teams as the last experiment, but a different attribute. Will we see an impact from Arsenal, West Ham and Blackburn having players that universally step up perfectly to the big matches? Let's go and see. We'll start with Arsenal. We'll go in the same order as the last experiment. I'm kind of expecting, as I mentioned earlier, for Blackburn to have the biggest value from this. Let's see if it's more or less influential than consistency. Well then, Arsenal have finished 5th, which suggests that over a course of a season, it's certainly not as important as improving player consistency. However, it's not just about the results, is it? We want to see what games FM deems important. Which ones are the big matches they're stepping up for? And are they then losing more against the bottom sides? I'll be really intrigued to see this. So let's go through to the players first. Want to have a look at the general average ratings. Can't imagine it will have as much of an impact as it did in the other one. Let's have a look at the selection info. Okay, so most players in the 7s again. So is that because in the important matches, and I can kind of see it from the graphic there for the last 5 games, there's lots of big standout greens and then lots of average performances. But it seems if there's 5 or 10 of those brilliant ones over a season, it takes people over. I'm very interested to see that there's more goals in the Arsenal team. So I wonder if in those big matches, are they then winning 3 or 4 or 5-0? I do find this very intriguing. I've got to find out. One of these attributes has to be important. There's a reason over the years when in real life Spurs and Everton and the likes were finishing in the top 6 or 7 that they were getting relegated in FM. There's got to be some sort of mental factor in that. But I can't work out which it is from here. If we take out the players away on loan, we have got the usual top performers, although Erdegaard's had a better season than ever. His important matches wasn't that low though, so I'm not sure why that would be the case. But otherwise, there's no massive surprises. Divock Origi coming on loan perhaps is one towards the end of the year, but in terms of the players that started, I'm not shocked by that. What I think is going to be more important in this one is the schedule. Who have they been winning against and have they stepped up? Well, second game of the season, they played Man City, they lost 3-0. So they didn't step up for that one. However, after a 1-1 draw away in the London derby, they then battered United 4-1 at Old Trafford, stepped up on a big occasion. And again, Nicola Pepe is one of the biggest gainers because he did have a low important matches attribute. He had a very low consistency one in the last experiment. And he has been probably one of the main benefactors from this. Looking into the future months, lost at Liverpool, lost at home to Chelsea. So it's not really had a huge impact on those massive games other than perhaps that United one. Again, drew with Chelsea, lost to City in the Cup, lost to Chelsea in the Carabao Cup on penalties, drew with Liverpool, and then beat United 3-0 and Spurs 2-1 at the end of the year. So bar against United, who might have just had a poor year, we'll see in a minute, I'm not sure that's really had any effect. They've won the games that you would expect them to win by and large, and they've lost the games you'd expect them to lose by and large. Maybe they've stepped up and got a few more points overall against the likes of Chelsea and Spurs and United than we'd seen in other saves. But it's certainly not striking, I wouldn't say. So I'm a little bit disappointed by the influence of that. And given the importance in the transfer window a lot of us place on the dreads big matches and the really relishes the occasion, I kind of feel that's unfounded because it doesn't seem to have that much of an impact. I might be proven wrong by the other two later. The only thing I guess we could say here is after a shaky March and April, they did have a really strong finish bar the last day. So maybe that's somewhere it helps them. Something that's going to be very important with Blackburn, of course, later on in this episode. Let's have a look at West Ham note. We will go over to the table after that. I don't want to spoil where West Ham finished, so let's go and have a look at them first. Well, it's had some impact, but not as much as we maybe expect. West Ham finish 11th, a couple of places below their expected position. Of course, it'll be very interesting to see how they did in the Cups too, how the players have performed, but overall, I'm not entirely shocked by that. It is fair to say that West Ham probably have the strongest mental attribute makeup of any squad of the 3 we've picked. They're the reason they're included in this, so we've got a bit of variety. Very consistent team, very big in the important matches, but here they seem to have struggled a little bit. So let's see what that's done to their senior squad. Some good average ratings and a few very poor ones, but by and large the players who played regularly were great. Again, the usual suspects: Souček, Bowen, Rice. Fornals is one that's massively gained because he was one who had a very low important matches rating. We can see he scored and assisted a few more goals, so maybe he's one that stepped up. And Zuma's a little worse than normal as well. Guess he didn't have as much to gain from the important matches attribute. But let's go straight to the schedule with them because that's definitely the story of this attribute experiment. And let's see how they've got on. If we can get the month split back because for some reason it's not there. There we go. So we're near the end of the season. They finished poorly as well. They got to the Europa League quarter-final. They lost to Napoli. So maybe didn't step up much in the big games. Although they did beat Monaco and won 4-1 at home to Rangers before that. In the FA Cup, they went out in the quarter-final to Villa. So they've fallen at a big hurdle there. League Cup, I can't see them. So they went out to Newcastle in the third round. Is that just because they haven't played the massive sides? I don't know. But I'm looking at their league defeats and by and large, Chelsea, United, yes, maybe Brighton, but Manchester City, Arsenal, Newcastle away, Chelsea away, Spurs at home, all by the odd goal. Then Liverpool, City, Everton and Burnley disappointing at the end of the year. But again, by and large, it's what you might expect from a West Ham season. And if they'd won or drawn, got 4 points maybe from that Everton and Burnley duo, they probably would have been in their expected position, I'm guessing, before we look at the point totals. So I don't think that this attribute, on the face of it, is anywhere near as important, certainly when it has a minor gain, to something like consistency. Because when West Ham went from 14 consistency up to 20, it had a big impact on their cup performance, certainly allowed them to be more consistent, had a massive impact on the average ratings, and this has had a little one on that front as well. But on performances and on results, it doesn't seem to be that key. So it's only going to leave us then with Blackburn to find out what happens when a club who's going to have a massive change in their important match behaviour, because most of their players were ranked 10, 11, 12, as we mentioned before, some even in single digits. So maybe that's where the gain's going to be. But from what I've seen with the two Premier League clubs, I wouldn't say it's as important as consistency for sure. So when you're looking at those scout reports, there's an important note for first off. Let's have a look at the Premier League table though. West Ham, look, they were level on points with 9th and 10th, so we probably can't even call that out of position. The only thing we can add is if they'd got 1 point in those two games that we mentioned, they'd be in 9th, which is where was expected. Arsenal were a little further off. 8 points away from United in 4th, despite beating them twice. Spurs were behind Arsenal, actually. Little bit of a weird table, that one. And wow, Weghorst again. Completely off topic for the experiment, but something that's catching my eye. He keeps getting top goal scorer in the Premier League. He's a very good player, a Dutch international. But in a Burnley side that's not massively performing, I don't get why he's so spectacular. It's an incredible effort. And I'd love to know if that's happening in all of your saves as well with the January update. But maybe not too many shocks from the Premier League and not too much of an influence following the important match attribute change. Blackburn is where it's at though. So let's get to the Championship. We've got one chance to save this experiment and prove for those who are fragile in the big games, it can make a massive difference. Now you may remember both in real life, in the two consistency experiments we did, universally, Blackburn finished awfully. The first half of the year they were right up there and then they barely won a game the last 3 or 4 months. Let's see the difference this time. Wow is the first words that comes to mind. They finished second. They've been promoted to the Premier League. Now that's part of the story because they finished in the playoffs both times in the other experiments. So we're not going to get too excited about that. What I need to know is how did they finish the season and how did they play in the big games. Let's start with the players in the senior squad. So again, the average rating's not that great. Maybe it's just a Premier League v Championship thing because it seems to be across the board. Even Diaz and Gallagher, 18 goals apiece, barely getting a 7 overall for the season. Defenders stronger again, but the midfield players, very average. Maybe they're just put into workhorse roles, I don't know, but on the face of it, it does seem a little bit harsh. Let's go straight to the schedule though. This is going to be the most interesting moment of the experiment. So Blackburn, look, they've started very well again. There's no doubt about that. We're just waiting for the months to appear. The question is, have they dropped off this time? No. Look how they finished. And look at the cup run as well. That's proof of the important matches. Yes, they had an easier run against Plymouth in the 3rd round. Beat Huddersfield extra time in a replay. Leicester penalties in the 5th round. QPR in the quarters. Narrowly lost to Aston Villa in the semis. But that's huge. And then look how they finished the league season. 1-0, 1-0, 1-0, 1-1. Gone are all those big defeats against the teams they expected to win against. They've stepped up in what I guess FM deems important matches. So are they deeming important as when you're in a title race or a promotion race, then we're going to step you up in those occasions, regardless of the opposition? Because that is a stark contrast to what we saw in the consistency experiment. We'd maybe expect them to be good. But if they were consistently not stepping up to the big games, maybe we got the result we expected there. Here, we've definitely seen an impact from the important matches attributes having a massive rise in this young team. They had a sticky spell around February time, but overall, they've been brilliant. And towards the end of the season, we're talking about teams like Bournemouth they've beaten at home. Some big away results as well. That's an incredible effort. We've got to see how far ahead and behind they were. They were in Second place, 7 points behind Fulham, 1 point ahead of Sheffield United and Bournemouth. So they probably went into that final game of the season needing the point, didn't they? And that shows incredible balls if they can then produce it. What about Blackpool, by the way, up in 8th place? Jerry Yates, top scorer in the Championship, looking a superstar. That's an incredible effort. And my club, Luton Town, finally we're seeing what they deserve and something like what they managed to achieve in real life too. That is the most important part of the experiment for me, and you can see from the goal difference, they're a gritty team. They've been nicking points, they've been nicking wins when they needed to, and a team that's had probably the biggest overall change in the important matches attribute have delivered the most startling results. And I guess you could suggest it does have an influence, but for the teams where you're making minor adjustments, probably not. So if you've got players who don't really like the big matches or quite like the big occasion, I don't think you need to worry in your scout reports. My summary from this would be, if you've got a player that absolutely loves them, great. And if you've got a player that absolutely dreads them, beware. But the middle ones doesn't seem to make too much of a difference. It's not the end of the experiment though, and it's not a conclusive answer. To find out if this was just a fluke, a one-off, or whether it's going to be something that we really can judge our FM signings on moving forward and build our team around that sort of attribute and mentality, we need to do the opposite. So next Sunday at the same time, we will be back to look at players with the least important matches attribute possible. We are going to set the same 3 teams, every first team player, to 1 out of 20 for important matches. And we will see if we have the opposing effect, whether Blackburn drift down the table, or whether we get some shocks along the way. If you're looking forward to that and seeing whether it does make a big standout difference, and if you enjoyed this experiment overall, then please do put a thumbs up on the video. Let me know in the comments if there were any big surprises to you, or largely did we get what we expect. Raising the bar for ones who have a poor attribute is always going to make a big difference, but where it's a slight adjustment, doesn't seem to be too much overall. If you're looking forward to the reverse of this experiment next week and you want to make sure you don't miss it, then subscribe down below and turn that notification bell on. In the eye above, you'll find the top 3 playlist where there will be a new episode this evening, as well as both long-term stories, which start next week on fire. Please make sure you come and check them out. There's all the other key links in the description down below, but I'll put the top 3s above my head now. A massive thank you for watching as always. I'll see you here again this time next week as we find out what happens when every player dreads the big game.